We're here because free speech is under attack. We're here because people are being convinced that socialism works. We're here because people are being judged guilty until proven innocent. We are fighting back with facts. This is not a safe zone, so buckle up, Buttercup. This is the raw, naked truth.
An IRS expansion, increased taxes on just about everyone, and what else is in the so-called Inflation Reduction Act? Welcome to the Raw Naked Truth. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin, and with me for this Wallet Watch episode is Chris Calandra from Elliott Wealth Management. Chris, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me again, Eric.
Great to have you. So, as we know, the Senate barely passed what Bernie Sanders has called the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. Both CBO and the Joint Committee on Taxation have said this will have virtually no effect on inflation. But according to the Joint Committee on Taxation, it will raise taxes on virtually everyone, including those making less than $10,000.
Yes, and that would break President Biden's campaign pledge on not raising taxes on those earning under $400,000. But I'm reminded of the term that gets bandied about sometimes, that we live in a clown world. This is a great representation of a clown world. It's a PR name for the legislation. The legislation has nothing to do with reducing inflation. Anybody that has any serious view on this would determine that very little, if any, has anything to do with inflation. This is something that the Democrats had wanted to do for a long time. They got a chance to do it, and they did it, which is their right. They are in power in Congress, and they have a Democrat in the White House. But calling it an Inflation Reduction Act is incredibly clownish.
It really is. And it is amazing that both the Republicans and Bernie Sanders have all come out, saying that this has nothing to do with inflation. When you get the right and the left agreeing on anything these days, maybe, someone should listen.
Yeah, and I know we on the Wallet Watch usually don't do much in the way of politics, but I wish we could get to a time where if politicians said something, that there would need to be evidence. I'm not saying like in a court of law type evidence, but these politicians, they throw stuff out. It'll reduce this, it'll increase this, it'll help with that. And this is an instance where the Democrats, including the president, are saying it's going to reduce inflation, but there's very, very little evidence. You pointed out the CBO and other governmental organizations, not Republican think tanks, other governmental organizations that are meant to run metrics, do forecasts, have all said that this will not have an impact on inflation, and that it will raise taxes on most Americans. So it's just folly.
It really is. And I mean, it shows how much it's going to raise taxes when you're in the bill. They are prepared to increase the size of the IRS by 87,000 people. This makes the IRS larger than the FBI, the State Department, and the Border Patrol combined. You can't tell me you need 87,000 people to go after the allegedly maybe 1,000 top earners that have been, playing with their taxes.
Yes, this will impact most tax-paying Americans, and I can't quote the statistics specifically, but there are those out there that show that individuals, families making $100,000 are audited, get more scrutiny from the IRS than the uber wealthy. And if you think this is going to change that, then again, it's the clown world and it's folly. That is not what's going to happen. What will happen is what has always happened. A ton of the money will be completely wasted because the IRS, they say, is shorthanded, and that might be true, but the hands that they do have are very incompetent, unbelievably outdated technology, very inefficient. They lose stuff all the time. I think the error rate, if you call into the IRS and ask a question, is, and I'm guessing at this statistic, but I think it's like 35% or some ridiculous number like that. Horribly run organization, not to mention that a lot of Americans don't really have a lot of love for the mission of the organization anyway, but a terrible organization. The money will get wasted and it'll continue to be a larger, but still very inefficiently run government agency.
Yeah, inefficient seems to be the watchword for the IRS. You know, under the Trump administration, tax refunds were processed in an average of 6 weeks. Currently, we are recording this at the beginning of August, and the majority of Americans still have not gotten their tax refunds from April 15th.
Yes. And I will also say, and listen, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. You and I have known each other a long time, but I also read some stuff about how the IRS acquired some 5 million rounds of ammunition recently and 4,500 guns. And again, this is not fear mongering or, you know, the IRS is going to take you over and come in the middle of the night and steal your children. I'm not talking about any of that, but it is kind of a curious data point. What is the IRS spending money on that for? Either maybe something to be a little concerned about, or an example of what I said before, an organization that really is not going to be a good steward of your tax paying money. They're going to waste a lot of money, and adding 87,000 people to a governmental organization, in my view, is not going to be successful in any way, shape, or form, unless you want to just burn money needlessly.
Yeah, no, this is not going to go well. And, you know, those purchases of guns and ammo, these were actually confirmed by government budget reports.
Correct.
So that, you know, this is an absolute fact, not a conspiracy theory. There has, though, never been an explanation as to why the IRS needed to arm itself. So we'll have to see how they're going to spend all of this money. And something that I find really interesting is, where do they think they're going to find 87,000 employees when businesses are struggling to fill open jobs?
That's a good point. And, you know, if you think of macroeconomic theory, if you're looking at the allocation of limited resources, labor, which is in short supply, as you said, if you're really wanting to get an economy thriving, is it going to have the next person hired be with the IRS, or might they be better served in American industry, developing technology, serving customers, things of that nature? And within the government, it might make more sense to help with the defense of the country in this cyber attack centered risk. I mean, there's a lot of reasons to think that this is a bad idea, but it's being celebrated in many circles with this legislation being passed. I don't know politically, though, Eric, if Americans by and large, if they're paying attention, are going to buy this. And will they pay attention such that it has an impact in the midterm elections? But it's clown world. I keep going back to that.
It is. And I do think that people are paying attention to this. The fact of the matter is, the bulk of the spending in this bill is all geared towards climate change, while every poll puts inflation, the economy, and crime as the top 3 issues that people are worried about. This has nothing to do with crime. It will have no effect on inflation, and it will damage the economy, because if you're pouring more money into an economy where inflation is already rampant, you're just going to, you know, I think the next GDP report is going to show further losses. I think the next inflation report, it's going to be going up again. And I think that's what people are going to be paying attention to.
I think you're right. The American people may not be a financial geek like I am and immersed in this stuff like I am, but they get inflation. Instinctually, they get inflation. And the idea of spending billions of dollars to develop new technology that is fighting climate change, which is kind of a little bit of a murky thing. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Really flies in the face of what Americans are talking about at the kitchen table over coffee in their cubicles at work. The administration, I think, has shown a knack for working on things, right or wrong policy, setting that aside. They're working on things that are not really what Americans are worried and or focused about. And that explains a lot of the negative polling. I think it was something, I may have talked about it on your show, Eric. I think there's a poll out there that said that something like 7 in 10 Democrats feel that the administration is not addressing issues that are important to them. And this so-called Inflation Reduction Act, I think, is another example of that. And Larry Summers, you mentioned Bernie Sanders. Larry Summers, an esteemed economist, been around a long time, served in the Obama administration as Treasury Secretary, I think. You know, he has said early on, before inflation really surged, he said, if you pass the prior legislation that pumped trillions of dollars into the economy, that you were going to get inflation, warned the administration and the Democrats against moving forward. Now we have the inflation. His forecast actually proved true. He's saying the same thing again, and his own party, which he was part of the Obama administration, he's saying the same thing about this act, that it's just adding further gasoline on the inflation fire. And that seems about right to me. I agree with Professor Summers.
Yeah, I think both you and he are absolutely right. We are in for a bumpy ride, so everybody fasten your seatbelts. And Chris, thanks for being on another edition of our Wallet Watch segment. You can catch every episode of The Raw Naked Truth at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and platforms that respect freedom of speech. We'll see you next time.